Hi, I'm Gerard Saylor of the L.D. Fargo Public Library in beautiful downtown Lake Mills, Wisconsin. Right now I'm in the library annex, which is an old house directly behind the library that was bought a few years ago by the city and the library board with the intention of eventually knocking it down and doing expansion of the library over here. Hasn't happened yet, but the building's going to get knocked down pretty soon, sometime in the next year probably, because the roof is just awful. It'll cost us $10,000 to $15,000 just to repair it, and it's not worth the money. And this is where we have the annual book sale, actually twice annual book sale, spring and fall. It's coming up in a couple weeks, and that's some of the stuff for sale behind me. And I've got two books here. Both were really good. I've been able to get through a lot of books this year. I've been really reading pretty steadily. And these two I read right in a row, and they're both really good. First up is Mr. Monk Goes to Germany by Lee Goldberg. You might be familiar with the television series. It's in its 5th, 6th, 7th season, something like that, featuring Monk, who's an idiosyncratic detective. He's incredibly obsessive compulsive. Everything has to be neat, everything has to be orderly and perfect symmetry, and he's a detective, former policeman in San Francisco who works as a consultant with homicide detectives there. And so each episode he solves a crime in his kooky little way. He always looks, he has that look. If you're unfamiliar with the television show, it doesn't matter. It's still a really good book. It introduces everything about Monk to you. And if you like the television show, it's also really good because you learn a lot more about Monk and his assistant Natalie, who also narrates the book. In this one, Monk has always had twice weekly appointments with a psychiatrist. Every week, twice a week, for years. And then he finds out one day that the psychiatrist is going to be leaving for a week to go to Germany for a conference. Well, Monk just can't cope. And so he does the only logical Monk thing, which is he gets on a plane with Natalie and flies over to Germany to stalk a psychiatrist and meet a psychiatrist for these appointments. And Natalie's okay with doing that because at one point she went to Hawaii on vacation, and she's pretty sure the psychiatrist sent Monk over to Hawaii to follow her. Anyway, Monk gets over there, and he has his usual trouble. Everything is cobblestones, and he can't step on any cracks, and all the old buildings are kind of a little slanted a little bit, and it drives him nuts. And there's nature everywhere because there's woods. It's in this kind of rural area, and he just can't deal with bugs and dirt and anything like that. But what happens there is he ends up meeting some of the local cops, and they ask him to assist in consulting with murder. He helps out with that. He stalks a psychiatrist a little bit. He finds a six-fingered man who is supposed to be... There's a six-fingered man who murdered Monk's wife several years ago, and he's obsessed with finding a six-fingered man. He thinks this is a killer, da-da-da-da-da-da. But you learn a lot about Monk. You find out he's not just kooky, kind of funny. He's nuts. He's insane. He's crazy. You follow him from the beginning of the day to the end, and he doesn't make any sense. And you really find out a lot more about him, and you find out a lot more about what his assistant Natalie has to deal with, and keeping him going and keeping him moving. And so it's a real good benefit if you are a fan of the series. You see a lot there, and if you're not a fan of the series, it doesn't matter because Goldberg really draws you in. There's a lot of humor in here. If you don't like guts and gore, there's not really any of that, and it's just a really fun novel. Next up is Cottonwood. Cottonwood is set in 1873 southeast Kansas, and then there's like a break, and then it goes up to 1890, featuring Bill Ogden, who went out to Cottonwood. Cottonwood's a fictional town. He goes out there in 1873 to homestead with his wife. He decides he hates homesteading, he hates farming, and after a few years he starts up a saloon in town, and he spends all his time in his town. He pretty much abandons his wife and his 10-year-old son out on the farm. He'll go out there every morning and do a couple hours work, but mostly he just leaves them out there. He works the saloon, he has sex with whoever he has available to him in town, and he's a bit of a bum. He's a bit of a self-absorbed jerk. And Mark Laval, a wealthy guy from Chicago, comes to Cottonwood with the intention of making it a trailhead location because he knows the railroad is going to be coming through. And he figures it'll be a trailhead for the cattle drives that are coming up from Texas and through Oklahoma. And never mind that the cattle drives are pretty much ending about that time. Laval has this great idea. They're going to build these massive stockyards, and he's going to have saloons and restaurants and hotels, and everybody's going to make a whole bunch of money. And Ogden goes in a partnership with Laval to build a bigger and grander saloon. And at the same time, Bill falls for Laval's wife, and she falls for him, and they start doing the deed together. And at the same time, there's kind of this subplot about the Benders, the Bloody Benders, which is actually a true story. The Benders lived in the prairie in Kansas, and travelers would go through, and they would lodge travelers And if they found out that traveler had any money, well, they'd slit his throat, stick him in the basement, bleed him out, bury him out in the orchard, and keep all his stuff. And so they go through quite a few people, and it's well known that people, the travelers, just kind of disappear out in the prairie. Nobody knows what it is. And Bill stumbles upon this, and he and Laval join up on the posse to go after the Benders. The Benders kind of know that they've been found out, and they take off running. Anyway, Bill and Laval go after the Benders, and Laval obviously knows that Bill is shagging his wife because he tries to shoot Bill in the back. Bill shoots Laval instead, scattles back to Cottonwood, grabs Laval's wife, and they head out to Colorado. But Bill is still pretty much a self-absorbed jerk, and after a couple of years there, he leaves her and just never goes back, and she ends up going back to Cottonwood, and 13 years later he's in San Francisco when he sees a news article that the Bloody Benders, lo and behold, the 2 women of the clan had been arrested in Ohio and sent back to Kansas. And so Bill decides, it's time to go back to Cottonwood. Finds out, well, Laval's wife and him have a son he didn't know about, and the Benders aren't the Benders, they're just a couple crazy old ladies. And he finds out that the posse actually caught the Benders and kept all the money that the Benders have been running away with. And anyway, it doesn't really matter so much. It's really just a great story, a great period story about Bill, this relationship with the wife and Laval. And it is, the nice break and the 13-year break there is neat because in 1873 you see all these different characters that are kind of starting out in this town. Restaurateurs and all the different business people, and they're all kind of scuzzy and not so great. And then 13 years later, Cottonwood is actually quite a bit bigger town, and all these same scuzzy characters are actually all kind of a bit scuzzy, but they're just dressed in suits, and they don't want to admit it. Like, for instance, one guy doesn't want to admit that he used to go down to all the whorehouses down in the bad area of town, which are no longer there, but I never did that. So, it's just a good novel. Try it out. My description might be so great, but that's okay. I was actually going to do this at the Tyrannina Brewery. I was going to ask him to do it over there. Tyrannina is a local brewery here in town, and I figured, hey, that'd be a good location because Cottonwood has a saloon. I could do it in their tasting room. And then I decided that's too much trouble because this camera sound is pretty lousy and you want to be able to hear anything. And then I thought, oh, I could do it next to all their vats and everything where the brewing equipment was. But then I'd run into the same problem, and I'd have to call them up and go in the back and try to arrange everything, and it still wouldn't work, and I'd just get all ticked off, and so I didn't do it. But the neat thing about Laval too, or Bill in Cottonwood, is that he's kind of a self-absorbed jerk, but at the same time he has this real sense of justice. He tries to intervene in a double lynching in 1873. He tries to help out a guy he's a landlord with in 1890 in San Francisco, and when he comes back he tries to get the 2 Bender women off at trial, even though everybody just wants to convict them, and they do. And Bill finds a way to try to help him out. But Lee Goldberg's Mr. Monk Goes to Germany, and if you like this one, there's several in the series, but they're all pretty good, because that one certainly was. And Cottonwood by Scott Phillips, which has, if you'll notice, I read 2 of his other books, The Ice Harvest and The Walkaway, which were also in Kansas, but set in 1970s Wichita, Kansas. And those were really good too. I actually didn't know this existed. Did I mention this? I didn't know this existed until I saw a mention of it online. This actually came out 5 years ago, and I was really glad to see that the book is there. So I'm Gerard Saylor of the L.D. Fargo Public Library in beautiful downtown Lake Mills, Wisconsin, and that's what's to read.